A German shepherd dog keeps cuddling a sobbing bobcat kitten, refusing to part from her side, not even for meals or rest. Initially, the veterinarian assumes it's just empathy, but then he notices something unusual in the dog's actions. Something that raises his suspicions. When he uncovers the reason, he's overwhelmed with emotion. Why is this dog so devoted to the bobcat kitten? What happened to their families? And how did a dog and a bobcat kitten come together under such heart-wrenching circumstances? Before we dive into this tale, share in the comments where in the USA you're joining us from today. It was a stormy night in rural Oregon. Veterinarian David Roberts had just finished his last surgery of the day. An elderly cat with a non-cancerous growth. The clinic's lights cast faint glows onto the rain-slicked road outside. The clock on the wall read nearly 10 p.m., and David was ready to lock up. Then a scratching at the door pierced the quiet. Not soft taps, but urgent, desperate pawing like someone needed to get inside fast. David flicked on the porch light and opened the door. There stood Shadow, a German shepherd quivering in the downpour. Her coat was drenched, matted in clumps, water puddling beneath her feet. But what stunned David wasn't her soggy state. It was what she gently carried in her jaws. Shadow stepped into the clinic, each paw leaving a damp mark on the floor. With remarkable care, she set down a bobcat kitten. The tiny creature was soaked, trembling, too frail to protest or make a sound. David instantly recognized Shadow. She belonged to the Anderson family, who lived on the edge of town near the national forest. 2 weeks earlier, Shadow had been at the clinic, giving birth to 6 healthy puppies. The last time David saw her, she was contentedly nursing her litter. When he reached to pick up the bobcat kitten for a checkup, Shadow moved swiftly between them. Her large frame shielded the tiny creature. No snarls, no bared teeth, but her muscles tensed in a clear protective stance. David, well-versed in animal behavior, stepped back. "It's all right, Shadow," he said softly. "I just want to help her." He grabbed a soft towel from a cabinet and approached again, moving deliberately to show his intent. Shadow's deep brown eyes tracked his every move. Finally, perhaps sensing his goodwill, she eased back slightly, allowing David to gently lift the kitten. On the examination table under bright lights, the bobcat kitten's condition became clear. Her wet fur revealed a fragile frame, her bobcat spots barely discernible. As David carefully dried her, she let out a faint, pained mew. Shadow instantly responded with a low whine, her body tensing, eyes locked on the tiny creature. David estimated the kitten was about 3 weeks old, suffering from severe cold, dehydration, and hunger, yet miraculously uninjured. How had such a young bobcat survived alone in the wild, without her mother? He prepared a special formula for wild kittens, warming the bottle to just the right temperature. But before he could feed her, something extraordinary happened. Shadow, a dog 10 times the kitten's size, leapt onto the examination table, something she'd never done before. David froze, unsure how to respond, but Shadow simply lay down, curling her body protectively around the kitten. Then, astonishingly, the bobcat kitten, instead of shrinking from the large predator, inched toward Shadow. Guided by untaught instincts, she found Shadow's teats and began to nurse. David stood there, bottle in hand, utterly amazed. A German shepherd was nursing a bobcat kitten, 2 species that are natural rivals in the wild. "Unbelievable," he murmured, setting the bottle aside. In nearly 15 years as a veterinarian, he'd never seen anything like this. This isn't just unusual, he thought. It defies all natural instincts. What drove Shadow to protect a creature she'd typically see as prey? David glanced at the clock. It was nearing 10 p.m. He had to call the Anderson family. They must be frantic, searching for Shadow. Flipping through records, he found Robert Anderson's number and dialed. "Hello?" Robert's voice was weary, strained, as if sleep had eluded him for days. "Robert, it's David Roberts, the vet. Shadow's here at the clinic." A pause, then a relieved exhale. "Thank heavens, we've been searching everywhere. Is she okay?" "She's fine, but something unusual is happening. Can you come by?" "I'll be there right away." While waiting, David watched the peculiar pair on the table. Shadow lay still, her body a protective shield around the nursing kitten. Occasionally, she gently licked the kitten's head, a maternal gesture to clean and comfort her young. These weren't typical dog behaviors toward another species. They were deliberate, tender actions. 20 minutes later, the doorbell chimed. Robert Anderson entered, his clothes slightly disheveled, eyes shadowed from sleeplessness. Behind him was Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, blonde pigtails framing wide blue eyes filled with worry. "Shadow!" Lily called, rushing toward the dog, but David gently held her back. "Easy, Lily," he said kindly. "Shadow's in a unique situation." He led them to the table, and where Shadow still lay, guarding the tiny bobcat kitten. Robert and Lily froze, stunned by the sight. Shadow, missing for 2 days, was nursing a small spotted creature. "Is that a bobcat?" Robert asked, voice thick with astonishment. David nodded. "A bobcat kitten about 3 weeks old. Shadow brought her here an hour ago, drenched and nearly lifeless from cold and hunger." "How?" Robert shook his head, baffled. "Why would Shadow bring a bobcat here? How did she even find her?" David looked at Robert, then at Shadow. "I think you need to tell me what happened first. Why did Shadow vanish? Last I saw, she'd just birthed a healthy litter." Robert sighed deeply, grief etching his face. He pulled up a chair, sinking into it as if too weary to stand. "It was a terrible accident," he began, voice cracking. 2 days ago during the storm, we went to town for supplies. We didn't expect the rain to be so bad. When we got back, floodwater had swept through the low areas around the house. The shed where Shadow and her puppies were staying, it was flooded." He paused, struggling to compose himself. Lily pressed against her father, tears brimming in her eyes. "Shadow had moved her puppies to a higher platform in the shed," Robert continued, "but it wasn't enough. We tried to reach them, but it was too late. All 6 puppies drowned. Shadow tried to save them," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "She carried each one in her mouth, trying to get them out of the water, but they weren't breathing." David felt a heavy sorrow rise within him. In his career, he'd seen many tragedies, but a mother's loss of her young was always the hardest to bear. "How was Shadow after that?" he asked gently. "Like a ghost," Robert said, staring into the distance. "She wouldn't eat or sleep, just pace the shed searching for her puppies. She'd bark, cry, then lie still by their empty basket like she'd died too. We tried comforting her, offering her favorite treats, but she was unresponsive. Then 2 mornings ago, when I went to feed her, she was gone." Robert gazed at Shadow and the bobcat kitten, disbelief in his eyes. "But how did she find a bobcat and adopt her? It's unimaginable." David pondered, piecing it together. "Have you heard of bobcats near your home lately?" Robert nodded, surprised. "A female bobcat was spotted near our farm a few times, at dusk by the forest edge. She looked pregnant about a month ago, but we haven't seen her since. I suspect," David said, the puzzle coming together. "The storm may have killed this kitten's mother. Maybe she was injured or trapped, unable to return to her baby. The kitten was left alone, crying out in hunger and fear. Shadow, still grieving her puppies, with her maternal instincts in overdrive, found this kitten in the woods, a fellow orphaned soul in need of a mother. Her instincts overcame natural barriers." "That's incredible," Lily whispered, eyes shining with awe. "Shadow found a new baby to love." David re-examined the kitten, prompting a watchful response from Shadow. The bobcat let out a weak cry, and Shadow replied with a soothing sound. "She's malnourished and dehydrated but uninjured," David said, placing the kitten back beside Shadow. "Remarkably, Shadow's milk glands are still active. This is rare but possible. When a mother dog loses her litter, hormones can sustain milk production. It saved this kitten's life." Robert exhaled, visibly relieved. "So, what now? Can we take Shadow home?" David shook his head gently. "Separating them now would be risky. The kitten's too young to survive alone, and Shadow's deeply bonded to her. It could distress them both." "What do you suggest?" Robert asked. "I think Shadow should stay here with the kitten for a few days until we know more. Bring her bedding and toys to make her comfortable, and visit any time." Robert looked at Shadow, who was tenderly licking the kitten's head. Her eyes still held grief, but now there was a flicker of purpose. "All right," Robert agreed, "if that's best for Shadow." After the Andersons left, promising to return the next day, David watched the pair on the table. Shadow curled around the tiny creature, shielding her with clear devotion. The orphan bobcat had found nourishment and safety from an unlikely source. In the dim clinic light, David felt deeply moved. He'd seen many marvels in his work, but nothing like this. 2 broken hearts mending each other, transcending nature's divides. The next morning, David woke early on the clinic's fold-out cot, having stayed to monitor the pair. In the examination room, morning light streaming through the windows, he noticed a change in Shadow. She'd moved to a thick mat on the floor, creating a cozy nest for the kitten now named Wilder. Surprisingly, Shadow had eaten all the food left out, the first time she'd eaten normally since losing her puppies. Each day, Shadow grew stronger. She responded to her name again, her tail occasionally wagging when David or the Andersons visited. But her care for Wilder was extraordinary. With endless patience, Shadow cleaned Wilder after feeding, stimulating her digestion as she would her own puppies. She nudged Wilder to keep her clean, and stood protectively when strange noises arose, teaching her about dangers. David documented their progress, noting how caring for Wilder gave Shadow new purpose. Wilder, who wouldn't have survived alone, had found a surrogate mother. Robert renovated a shed area on their farm, creating a safe space with warm bedding, climbing shelves for Wilder, and a secure outdoor area for practicing bobcat skills like climbing and pouncing. One morning, when Wilder was about 2 weeks into their care, Lily rushed into the clinic, excited yet anxious, her blonde hair tousled. "Dr. David, Dad," she shouted. "There's a mother dog with puppies behind the school. They're weak and hungry." David grabbed his medical bag and followed Lily. Behind the school, under a tattered awning, they found a Labrador mix with 3 tiny puppies. The mother, a light brown female, was painfully thin, ribs protruding but uninjured. She tried to stand to protect her pups, but was too weak. The puppies, about 3 to 4 weeks old, were fragile but alive, sheltered in a dry spot. "How long have they been here?" David asked, kneeling to examine the mother. "We found them yesterday," Lily said. "My friend Emma heard crying and we brought cafeteria food, but today the mother couldn't eat. I was scared she might—" David patted Lily's shoulder. "You did the right thing telling us. We'll help them." With Robert's help, they moved the dog family to the clinic. David set up a separate area, giving the mother fluids, checking for parasites, and starting her on nutrient-rich food. "She's severely malnourished but healthy otherwise," David explained. "Likely a stray, she used all her energy nursing her pups." "Can we help her?" Lily asked, eyes worried. "Absolutely," David smiled. "With food, water, and shelter, she and her puppies will recover." Robert and Lily named the mother Belle, and her puppies, 3 males, Charlie, Bobby, and Max, the smallest. A soft whine came from Shadow and Wilder's area. Shadow had sensed the newcomers. David checked on her, unsure how she'd react. Shadow stood alert, ears perked, with Wilder peeking curiously from behind her legs. "This might be tricky," Robert said quietly. "Shadow's still sensitive after her loss." David nodded. "We'll be cautious, but this could help her reconnect with other animals." After stabilizing Belle and her pups, they tried a controlled introduction. David brought Belle into the treatment room, separated by a low barrier. Shadow and Belle eyed each other warily, both protective mothers. Then Max, the tiniest puppy, wobbled toward the barrier, curious about Shadow and Wilder. Wilder, now healthier, approached too, her eyes bright with interest. Shadow watched closely. When Wilder and Max nearly touched noses through the barrier, Shadow sniffed Max gently, showing no aggression. Over the next few days, a bond formed. Shadow accepted Belle and her puppies, and the 2 mothers seemed to recognize their shared role. Shadow took a special interest in Max, licking his fur and lying beside him when Belle rested. A unique family emerged. Shadow, the grieving mother, Wilder, the orphaned bobcat, Belle, the weary mother, and her puppies, especially Max. They connected through shared pain, supporting one another. David documented this remarkable dynamic, noting its scientific and emotional significance. "This isn't just instinct," he told Robert one afternoon as they watched the group. "It's emotional intelligence. These animals are choosing to heal together." Robert nodded, eyes on Shadow. "I thought we'd lost her after her puppies died. Now she's vibrant again." While Shadow cared for Max and the others, Wilder began showing bobcat traits, quick, clever, with sharp hunting instincts. Yet she still sought Shadow for comfort. 2 months later, Shadow was transformed, no longer the hollow dog Robert described, full of energy. She ran in the outdoor area, tail wagging. She taught Wilder caution, and the puppies play, adapting to each species' needs. Wilder, now nearly the size of a house cat, displayed vivid bobcat spots and agile climbing skills. Though bonded with Shadow, her wild instincts grew stronger. David collaborated with a wildlife center to prepare Wilder for release, knowing bobcats typically stay with their mothers until 9 to 12 months old. Belle fully recovered and joined the Anderson family permanently with her puppies. She and Shadow formed a cooperative bond, co-parenting their mixed litter. One day, David saw Shadow nudging Max and Wilder simultaneously. Max mimicked Shadow's gentle movements, while Wilder practiced precise stalking. Shadow guided both, a bridge between species. "I've never seen anything like this," David said, watching through the shed window. "Shadow's built a new family across species lines. She's not sad anymore," Robert said, relieved. "She was broken, but now she's whole again." David nodded. Healing others healed her. She found Wilder, then Belle and her pups, and built a new purpose. At 4 months, wildlife experts deemed Wilder nearly ready for the wild. They took her on forest trips to hone her hunting skills. Shadow grew anxious during Wilder's absences, but stayed steady, caring for Belle's puppies, especially Max, who filled a piece of Wilder's place in her heart. On Wilder's release day, Shadow joined them at a forest 10 miles from the farm. David opened the cage and Wilder stepped out, sniffing the air, sensing her true home. She hesitated, glancing back at Shadow. Shadow stood calmly, her expression serene as if understanding Wilder's path. Wilder rubbed her head against Shadow's neck one last time, and Shadow licked her gently, a final blessing. Then Wilder slipped into the forest, pausing once to look back, her yellow eyes gleaming before vanishing. Shadow watched until Wilder was gone, showing no distress, only acceptance. Back at the farm, she greeted Max with a lick, checking on Belle and the others with calm assurance. In the weeks that followed, Belle and her puppies thrived. Max, deeply bonded with Shadow, mimicked Wilder's stealthy movements, blending dog and bobcat behaviors. David documented their story for a scientific paper, highlighting their adaptability. Months later, Robert noticed bobcat tracks and small prey left near the farm, with faint bobcat calls at night. Shadow seemed to sense Wilder's presence, gazing toward the forest with a soft whine, a greeting, not grief. One moonlit night, as David and the Andersons sat on the porch, a young bobcat appeared at the forest edge, her fur glowing, eyes like lanterns. Wilder stood briefly, watching, then melted into the darkness. Shadow, lying with Max at Lily's feet, looked toward the forest with quiet contentment. David reflected on their journey. Shadow, shattered by loss, found Wilder, an orphaned bobcat, and they saved each other. Wilder returned to her wild roots, while Shadow built a new family with Belle and her puppies, especially Max, who carried Wilder's spirit. "Sometimes," David said softly, gazing at the stars, "the deepest wounds heal by helping others." Shadow's love crossed species lines, proving hope shines even in the darkest times. Lily hugged Shadow. "Will Wilder visit again?" "Very likely," David smiled. "Some bonds are too strong to break, even across different paths." As night fell, David saw Shadow and Wilder's story as a testament to resilience, love's power to bridge divides, and the healing found in caring for another heart, even one from a different species.